Hey guys, Sean here from the Gardener Center. So my winter coat is finally off, and I'm out in a real world garden situation again here this time. And I have two very specific perennials that I'm going to talk to you guys about that we sell boatloads of at the Gardener Center. So I know you guys have them at home, and they're kind of outliers in the world of perennials because they grow and behave differently than 99% of the perennials that we sell and that you probably have at home in your garden. And I want to kind of explain a little bit first what makes them different from most perennials, and then that'll help provide a little context to why we treat them a little differently in the springtime when we clean them up or prune them up or trim them up. So I'm going to be talking about two guys today. This one here is Itoh Peonies. We sell a whole bunch of those. And then, of course, lavender, which is one of our best-selling perennials. So I know a bunch of you guys have those at home. So we're going to get into some lavender too. But first, I want to let you know what makes these two specific plants so different from the rest. Most perennials are what are described as herbaceous plants. If you already know what herbaceous means, that's cool. But for those of you who don't, let me explain. So an herbaceous plant is a perennial that dies back completely in the fall once we have a couple of hard freezes, usually late November, early December. Once they've frozen a few times, all of the growth from the soil line to the tops completely dies, and that plant disappears. So these are things like hostas, daylilies, coneflowers, garden phlox, things like that. Things that in the winter or in the springtime are just not there anymore when you in the garden after they've died back in the wintertime. The Itoh peonies and the lavender behave differently because they're actually woody plants. They're still perennials. The lavender's technically an evergreen shrub, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. They're woodier, so that makes their pruning a little bit different. So I have this Itoh peony right here that has not been pruned yet. And I know a lot of you guys like to cut back your perennials in the fall, but I'm going to ask you not to, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why we waited till the first week of April to get into this perennial right here and to cut it back. A lot of beneficial insects use the hollow stems of perennials after they died back in the fall to deposit eggs, or for the adults to hibernate in over the winter. So if you cut your perennials back in the fall or during the winter months or too early in the spring, a lot of times you're sending beneficial insects to the landfill. So what you really want to do is wait as late as you can until the springtime, and then cut your herbaceous and your semi-herbaceous perennials back to give those beneficial insects a fighting chance to do their little life cycle thing in your plants here. So, and we usually like to wait until we've had like 3 or 4 consecutive days in a row of 50 to 55 degree temperatures, again, for the benefit of those insects. So I know a lot of you guys like to clean up in the fall time, but if you're gardening for pollinators or gardening for beneficial insects or the bees, leave your perennials alone if you can until into the early part of the spring. The bugs will thank you. So anyways, back to our Itoh peony over here. This guy's been left, and the Itoh peonies are different from the more common garden peony, which many of you have. The garden peony is a true herbaceous perennial. They disappear entirely in the wintertime. The Itoh peony is a combination, a cross between the herbaceous garden peony and the tree peonies. So that's why these guys have a little bit of that kind of woodiness going on. So this is like a perfect example of what this type of peony would look like at this time of year. And there's two ways you can handle this plant. I'm going to show you one way, and then I'm going to show you the way I like. So again, they have woody stems. So you can see a lot of these woody stems. They almost remind me a little bit of a hydrangea at this time of year. So they have woody stems, and you can see some of the leaves are popping out, way up here on these old stems from last year. So what you can do, just like a hydrangea, you can find that growth and then take your clippers and just go in and cut right above that new growth and leave, take the brown dead behind. Got another good one over here, that sort of thing. That's one way you can do this. It's just going in and removing the stems that don't have any viable new growth on them. What I really like to do, I really like to go in, because remember, it's a cross between the tree and the herbaceous peony, so it's got a little bit of both going on. It's got a little bit of woody, but it's also got a whole lot of, I'm just going to regrow from the roots every year. So I really like to go in and remove all of the old stems from last year. And you can see they have these pretty purple leaves as they come up in the springtime, and there's no shortage of them down here. So I really like to go in and remove all of last year's stems, down to about 6 or 8 inches above the ground. You can really have a good time doing this, especially on a nice day like today. So I like to go in and clear them all out of there, and that gives all this robust new growth down on the bottom space to grow. It's not trying to grow through other old stems, and honestly, I think it just produces a more robust plant, honestly, with a more shapely plant. So if you have Itoh peonies at home, and I know you do because we sell lots of them, and you didn't prune them back in the fall, this is I can't think of a better time of year to get out in the garden and have a little fun. So why don't you go check out your Itoh peonies and give them a little bit of a trim up. Going to move on to lavenders next. So if you got the Itohs, get out and get clipping. All right, guys, so I've moved over here into the garden to our not so herbaceous perennial number 2. And I know a lot of you guys have these at home already, because this is our #1 best-selling perennial at the Gardener Center. This is English lavender. If you have trouble growing English lavender or thinking of growing English lavender, check out our YouTube channel for my lavender video that we already have there, so check it out if you haven't already. This is an English lavender that's been kind of left to do its own thing, been left to its own devices here in a kind of a native-y arid garden. As the cactus are probably a giveaway here, the eastern prickly pear. So this one's kind of doing its own thing, and there's really not a lot to do with the lavender as far as pruning goes. And the lavender is technically an evergreen shrub. It's not an herbaceous perennial. It's an evergreen shrub. So pruning is minimal. You never want to prune your lavender by more than 1/3. And on this particular one, I would just go in and prune out all of these old flower spikes from last year. A quick cleanup sort of thing. And then on the stems with the viable growth, you can go in and trim them, but you're only going by 1/3. 1/3 of trimming on the lavender is kind of the rule. This is a nice example of the lavender here, because these older woody stems are exposed, and you never want to go in and prune or cut these wider, more than a pencil stems, because it won't leaf out there. So lavender gets pruned minimally, if at all. They're actually kind of pretty if left like this, so I would just go in and, again, just remove those stems here. So guys, if you haven't gotten out and tended to your lavender yet, do it. Smells even better on a warm day today. So guys, as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.